Hello, my name is Kiriath, and today we are going to have a little chat about these lads, the Berserkers, because my god, they're getting on a bit. And this is almost entirely down to the fact that I realised today, thanks to the Corpse Grinder cult kit focus on the Warhammer community site, that we are now in a position whereby Age of Sigmar and Necromunda both have better Berserker kits than the actual Berserker kit. Now, don't get me wrong. This kit does have its strong points. It's not all bad. There are elements of this that I think have aged okay. For instance, I think the backpacks on these guys actually have quite a bit of charm. They're quite cool. They've aged not too bad. Similar thing with the weapons. The weapons themselves are pretty solid. And let's be honest, there are helmets in this pack that are just like properly iconic. You think Berserkers, you think, well, I mean, just look at the helmets. They have to stay. Whenever this kit gets refreshed, which it had better do at some point, there are certain helmets that absolutely should remain. But overall, this is not a kit that's aged very well. It was one of the earlier attempts at trying to get some truly kind of dynamic in-motion poses, and it shows. There are some that have actually aged okay, and those are the ones that are standing still. The dude at the top there on this picture, these guys all actually don't look too bad. I mean, the arms are a bit static. They've got a bit of that very kind of early Terminator about them in a way, with the way that some of the arms just face forwards and there's not really much nuance or motion in the arms themselves. But it's when you get to things like the running poses that you start to find that actually it just doesn't look that great. And that helmet that is the skull with the teeth is shocking. Absolutely shocking. That is something that does not need to make a comeback. Please don't do that again. I mean, these poor lads here, the the lads that are running full tilt, admittedly, the pose on the head doesn't do much for the guy at the top left of the screen there, because it sort of looks like he's just tripping over because he's not looking the right way. And unfortunately, that is something that is a bit of a consistent theme with some of these running poses. They really are not quite up to scratch anymore. And yet, when you look at some of the Age of Sigmar stuff, I mean, these guys, the Blood Warriors, who I always forget their name, these look like what the Berserkers should look like. Yeah, they do have a bit of bare arm going on, but the helmets are absolutely they're fantastic helmets on these guys. Due to the bare heads, I could go without, but then, you know me, I always prefer a helmet on a model. And these guys have got some properly good sort of interpretations of what are essentially the 40k Berserker helms. They are just updated and improved and slightly fantasy adjustments of those helmets. But the thing is, they're only slightly fantasy adjustments. I mean, in this picture, you can clearly see the dude in the front and the guy at the back, both of those helmets would absolutely fit in 40k without any work whatsoever. They just would. They would just work perfectly. And in fact, they do, because this kit is one of the more widely used in terms of converting Berserkers, because no one wants to buy the ancient kit that just doesn't look so good anymore. And whilst there is, of course, slightly more fantasy than there is sci-fi to these guys, I mean, there's enough an ornate armour in 40k that you can kind of get away with it. The leather boots, really, are the only things that look a little bit out of place. You stick some backpacks on these guys, some Chaos backpacks, and they look better than the Berserkers do. And when I say they look better than Berserkers do, I'm not being, that's not hyperbole. They do look better than the Berserkers do, by quite a bit. Admittedly, there's not as much running going on with this particular kit, there's not as much charging, but despite the lack of full tilt running comparatively, the overall sculpts are just far superior. And even though they are Age of Sigmar and not 40k, they currently do a better job of representing what Berserkers kind of should look like, in a way. Not in terms of... maybe that's the wrong way to put it. They simply look fresher. They look better. They look more detailed. They look more nuanced. They are, a newer kit all round. And as such, they have all of those improvements that have been made since the Berserkers were made. They just look better. The thing is now, we even have something for Necromunda that looks better than the Berserkers in the form of the Corpse Grinder cults. Now, this is slightly different. This is like a different take on Khorne worship, because, of course, they are worshipping Khorne. It's not quite as cut and dry as the Blood Warriors, I would suggest, because the Blood Warriors just look overtly like fantasy Berserkers. These guys straddle that interesting line that happens quite a bit in Necromunda, where there's like a kind of interesting mix of different styles. But still, to me, these look like better Berserkers than the actual Berserkers. Now, of course, these guys are lacking, the full body armour of the Berserkers proper, and they're lacking the almost full coverage armour of the Blood Warriors. I mean, the Blood Warriors have got a bit of exposed arms here and there, but by and large, they're pretty well covered. These guys obviously don't have that. They've got this kind of like breastplate thing that also covers the shoulders, and in one case extends up and in front of the head there, which is a weird but funky design that I quite like. But they have their own strengths in terms of representing Berserkers on the tabletop slightly better than the actual Berserkers do. For a start, all of these guys are absolutely massive. Like, Necromunda, the models are just that little bit... They feel just that little bit bigger. I mean, if you buy, like, the Delac gang, those models are bloody huge. They're really, really tall. These guys are, like, beefy. They're properly roided out. I mean, they even come with chain axes, which is pretty nice. And the weapons they hold, they look suitably brutal, and they look suitably berserkerish. Now, of course, they are a bit more outlandish when it comes to the helmets and the overall appearance. But to me, they still have a certain charm that the Berserkers just don't really have anymore. They almost look like a gritty version of what the Berserkers could be. Of course, they do lack the armour. They also have a disadvantage in terms of the number that you get in the box. There aren't as many of the full-blown dudes. You only get the 6, whereas, of course, with the Berserkers themselves, you get a decent number for your money. You do get 12 in there. Blood Warriors, of course, you don't get quite as many either. But there is something about these guys that, again, a lot of it is down to the fact that they are newer. They have been made with, improved techniques, improved everything. Like, the amount of detail that can be put in them is just better than it used to be. And it's definitely not as economical. That's one downside if you wanted to actually go that direction and make that kind of really weird approach to Berserkers, which you could get from these guys, and it would look, I think personally, really, really good having like a proper horde of these guys. There is the downside, of course, that you only get the 6 of them, and you would still need to do a bit of work. I would argue that to make them properly look the part, you would have to, well, for a start, you'd have to source a bunch of Chaos backpacks, which, to be fair, I think you could fit easily enough. I mean, on most of these guys, just a bit of filing down the armour at the back, and you'd be able to slot a backpack onto there, no problem. Some that might be a bit trickier with some. Although, having said that, the only one that would really cause an issue is this guy with the big trophy rack on his back. But even then, I don't think it would be too much of a problem. You could still manage it. Downside, of course, is that with this particular set, you do have these guys as well, which those don't work. Those don't work as Berserkers in any way, in my opinion. The others you can get away with. They look more like gritty and industrial, and they have more of like a barbarian edge with the exposed skin and the fact that they, don't have full armor but are massively roided out. These guys, you wouldn't be able to do much with unless you just use them as cultists, which is another option. I mean, for me, the cultists of each individual legion should be kind of representative of the rest of it as well, and it should match in some way. You could probably pretty easily get away with doing something with these guys, and you'd end up with a small mob of them. I mean, if you really wanted to do two 12 strong squads of Berserkers using this box, you'd need to buy 4 of them. But you would also end up with 4 cultists, which you could easily mix with other standard cultists, paint them all the same way, and you've got a bit of a bulk out there. Or just use them for other projects. That's the alternative. It's obviously more pricey. It's definitely more pricey to get Blood Warriors or to get the Corpse Grinder cult. But both of them just look so much better than the actual Berserkers that we currently have. They still have that squat approach. They still have the static arms that especially now, just have not aged well. They still have the dodgy attempt at being like dynamically posed, but not quite being good enough at it yet to make it worth doing. By comparison, that just looks better. And if you wanted to go a bit weird with it, that looks way better in almost every way. Even if they don't fit the traditional, typical approach, especially with the lack of like what I'd say is like the proper iconic Berserker helms. But they still just look so much better than that by quite a high margin. I mean, what I really want to see is these reimagined. I really want to see these guys actually get an update, actually get a proper up-to-date kit that represents them properly and kind of gets rid of this weird middle ground they occupy, where they're old enough that they shouldn't look as out of date as they do, which is, I know, a weird way to put it, but it wouldn't be that bad of a kit anymore. Like, it wouldn't be that bad of a kit now if there was just a little tiny bit more development before they were made the first time, They're in a weird position of not quite fitting. Being close, but not quite there. Although, admittedly, still doing slightly better than Emperor's Children, because Noise Marines... Yeah, no, let's not talk about that. So yeah, just musing over the fact that currently Necromunda and Age of Sigmar have more interesting, more varied, more fun, and less janky-looking Berserker types than 40k does. And 40k is the one that actually has them called Berserkers. Let me know what you think of all that in the comments down below. Would you consider, that's the question for today, would you consider making a World Eater's army out of the Corpse Grinder stuff? Do you think they're close enough? Do you think they're too far away? What would you do to change them to make them a bit more suitable? If you even think they could be made more suitable? Or do you think they work how they are? With basing, with the right colour scheme, you could get away with it. I'd be interested to see what you think, because I really think there's potential in this kit for that sort of thing. But it's how far you want to go modifying them, and whether you'd consider that to be worth the effort to begin with. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Feel free to click all the things, Patreon, video, subscribe, all that stuff. Click it if you like, don't click if you don't want to. As always, there's an affiliate link in the description for Element Games. If you buy something, I get something saying that way. You save a bunch of money, and you were going to buy it anyway. So it's just a nice way to support the channel if you would like. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.